When I opened up this box in 2012, it changed my life. All 5 books I'm going to show have had a profound impact on me. In fact, I used one to propose to my wife. I'm responding to the tag video initiated by legendary comic YouTuber Alex the Comic Hoarder. Hazeldan reached out and tagged me specifically. Thanks, y'all. Here are the 5 books that are most meaningful to me. Book number 1. In 2012, I decided to rekindle an old passion. In the 1980s, I was a huge comic book collector. Far and away, it was Spider-Man that was my favorite character. There was one particular back issue that I wanted more than any other. Amazing Spider-Man number 1. I remember seeing an ad in a comic book. I wish I could find the specific ad. It listed Amazing Spider-Man number 1 for $1,000. Back then, at age 11, $1,000 though may as well have been $1 billion. It was a pipe dream to get that book. Moving back to 2012, I met a friend who knew a lot about collectibles. He knew coins especially well. He encouraged me to go after what my passion was, comic books. I went on eBay, saw an auction, Sparkle City, Amazing Spider-Man number 1 was on there. Okay, I'll give it a shot. I put in a bid of $2,500. Lo and behold, I ended up winning it. A few days later, I went to the post office to retrieve the book. The customer service rep handed me the box. I took it. I couldn't wait to get home though. I went to my car and I believe it was with keys. I opened up that box, unraveled the wrapping, had this book in my hands. The pleasure center in my mind was completely activated. 25 years of pent up frustration from not having this book that I dreamed about finally in my hands. It's a nice looking book. It's a 3.5. It's a blue label. It's got some flaws. It is not the most expensive book in my collection. It is, however, the one that means the most to me. If there were a fire, you bet your ass I'd be diving in there, probably hair and eyebrows being singed, but I'd grab that book and I'd take it out and I would let everything else burn down. It's not just the book, though, that made an impact on me. It opened up this world, this hobby. Since then, I've been spending several hours every week thinking about comic books. I've met so many good friends in the physical world and in the virtual world. Locally, I've had many invitations from organizations to present. Let me share a story with you. I was presenting to a local Rotary Club. This older gentleman slowly got up out of his chair. He raised his hand. I responded, "Yes, sir." He said, "When I was a kid back in the 40s and the 50s, I loved comic books. In the early 50s, I was stricken with polio. I was about ready to be quarantined. My brother went out to a local store, bought all types of comic books, came back with a huge stack. He was about ready to give them to me. Then my mom interceded and she saw some of the covers. This is the pre-code era of Golden Age. And these covers were horrific. The mom took about half those books and said, 'Son, you can't have them.' Nevertheless, of the remaining books, he remembers them and how those books helped him get through that tough time." I did have the opportunity to work on a project with Comic Book Insiders, CGC, Heritage Auctions, and a few friends, Ben Labonog, Robert Cat Conrad, and Matt Nelson. We did a poll to figure out what were the best classic covers of the Golden Age. Speaking of which, we're going to go to book number 2, which is a classic among classic covers. I'm going to go back to 2012 again. I just bought this copy of ASM number 1, which led me to hunt big Silver Age grails. I was going after X-Men number 1, Hulk number 1, and the like. I went back to eBay and I saw this auction coming up. Many awesome books listed, first appearances of characters. Then I see this book come out and it sells for $25,000 at a 6.5. I'm thinking, what kind of idiot spends $25,000 on a book that doesn't feature any superheroes? That question led me down a rabbit hole of investigating classic covers and the artists that drew them. A few months later, I wanted to be that idiot. I wanted a copy of Suspense Comics number 3 really badly. In 2013, about a year later, this amazing copy comes up on Comic Connect. I put a bid of $35,000 and end up getting it. It took me quite a while to pay off this book. Since then, this book has gone up in value quite a bit. To give you a sense, a 1.0 qualified copy sold at Heritage about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, for close to what I paid for the 7.0 Blue Label back in 2013. Many folks have said, Keston, why don't you sell the book? Here's the thing. It's my favorite book from my favorite artist in a grade that I'll never be able to get again. If I were to sell this book, I would be thinking about it every day. If I could save a second book in my collection, it would be this one after ASM #1. Going on to book number 3. As I learned more about Alex Schomburg, I understood that his work could be categorized into 3 major periods. His first period, when he just started, this was back in like 1940. His covers looked much like pulp covers, which is not a surprise because he worked in pulp magazines before he came over to comic books. Shortly thereafter, he began doing work that is probably his best known, and these were these World War II covers, many of them in Marvel Mystery and also in Captain America. Then there was a third period in the late 40s. This is 1947 to 1949, and he started concentrating on Good Girl art, and he had a special technique that he used to have these airbrush covers. Don't ask me how many copies of them that I have, because it's a ton. And all the copies that I have, this is my individual favorite copy. This is Exciting Comics number 66. It's a CBCS slab book. It's a 9.2, has white pages, and it's also from the famed Okajima pedigree. There are some copies of this book that are graded higher, but none looks fresher than this one. And I say that because I have a 9.62. These whites, which are typically so unforgiving on old Golden Age books, look as fresh as the day they came off the newsstand. It's hard to describe how this book feels in my hand. It does something that just touches my soul. Okay, let me go on to number 4. In 2016, I was about ready to make that big plunge from bachelor to married man. I met a wonderful woman. Her name is Megan. Wonderful in so many different ways. And she really understood and liked collectibles. Naturally, when she met me, we talked about comic books, and she began loving comic books as well. So I decided to pop the question with the comic book. This is King Comics number 51 from 1940, and it's got Popeye in the literally as a ring, and he's about to propose to Olive Oyl. This is a nice copy in 9.0. It comes from the Edgar Church Mile High collection, but choosing the right book was only half the challenge. I had to figure out how to stage it. In my head, I envisioned Megan opening up a box with this book and me proposing. The problem is I always open up boxes with comics right when I got them. I had to have an alibi. Here's where the ruse came in. Earlier in the week, I feigned an injury to my left hand. I sent a picture over to Megan. At the time, we were living in 2 different cities, so we would only see each other during the weekends. A few days later, she comes over to my house. I have all these boxes stacked up. We're about ready to go to happy hour, but I say, Miggy, I've been waiting all week long to open up these boxes. Can you help me out? She wants to go out, but she says, okay, sure. She opens up box number 1, legitimate comic books, gives them to me, and we go down to box 3, box 4. She's getting tired this time. She gets to box 5, opens it up, looks at it quickly, and hands it to me. I said, sweetie, you may want to take another look at that cover. She looks at it, and she immediately realizes what's happening. And she sees a ring that's inside the bag on top of the book. At that point, I proposed, and the rest is history. My final book, I'm going back to 1986, the summer of 1986. I'm 10 years old, about ready to turn 11. I remember going to the mini market, getting some candy, some round gum balls. I might have gotten one of those fake cigarettes. It was actually gum as well. Snickers bar, perhaps. Then I see this comic book rack. I love superheroes, so maybe I'll pick up one. And this is the book I see. It's Amazing Spider-Man number 279, and I pay 75 cents for it. I believe this is the first comic book I ever bought with my own money. Or in other words, ground zero from a comic book obsession. For this video today, I actually took this comic book out, opened it, and read it. Now, funny enough, even though Spider-Man is my favorite hero, and this is Amazing Spider-Man. He's not in this book, although he's referenced quite a bit. The climax is Silver Sable fighting Jack-o'-lantern. There were also a couple other interesting features. A car was drawn, a Ferrari Testarossa. This is the same model featured in Miami Vice. Definitely a telltale sign of the era. Also, what was cool is a picture of Stan Lee. Wow, he looks young. I thought about it, went back to Wikipedia, and realized that Stan Lee was born in 1922. So in the mid 80s, he must have been in his early 60s. God rest his soul, Stan Lee aged extremely gracefully. Let me bring this full circle. This was the book that began creating this bond between comic books and me. It's the reason that when I opened up Amazing Spider-Man #1, why it was so meaningful. If you want to see some more of my books, check out my top 25 video. If you really enjoy the content, consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching, and hope to see you around real soon.